All right, so this is the third assignment. And again, this is the first assignment where you're asked to collaborate as an organization, as a team, and also to do some work individually. And you'll be graded at those three different levels, right? So this document is divided in three portions. There will be the organization level tasks that you'll need to complete together as an organization. There will be several tasks that you need to complete within your team of three, right? And then there will be tasks that you have to complete individually yourselves. Okay. We give you, for instance, one of the things that you need to complete as a team, as an organization, is that as an individual you had created individual SRS documents, right, requirements documents on your own. All right. We need you to all come together as a group, as an organization, look at your own particular understandings of what those requirements were, right, and then merge them into a single requirements document that merges all your understanding of each one of those requirements that we've worked on so far. Right? Make sure that if there are any conflicting understandings, that they're resolved. If you have received any feedback from the TAs or myself, or if we have discussed something in class, or that we have answered certain questions on Piazza about certain understanding about user of these requirements, you make sure that all that is represented in the new version of the SRS document. All right, but there should be one single SRS document for the organizations. The organization will be working on towards a single product. Right, but each team will be working on different features of the same product. Yes? So there should be one single SRS document. So there's three portions to the assignment: the organization level task, the team level task, and the individual level task. Each one is worth 100 points, but it's worth different percentage for your individual grade at the end of the the grading for assignment number 3. Right? So the team will receive a grade, and that will be 20% of your particular grade. All right? For the team task, that's worth 30%, and also worth 100 points, but it'll be 30% of your particular grade. And then there's a 50% of your individual task that you need to complete on your own, which is half of the grade of this entire A3 assignment 3. Make sense? Right? Now, the organization level tasks, there's several things that need to occur that as an organization, right? And at the organization level, there might be different decisions by the leadership team, the CTO, or somebody with a higher pay than you, making all sorts of decisions, right? Strategic decisions on what technology stack that we're going to be using, what is going to be the focus for the next quarter or the next year or so, and typically those decisions trickle down towards your day-to-day of what you need to do. A couple of things that we'll need to do is we'll need to set up for instance, the CTO might have decided that for relational databases, we're going to use MySQL or Oracle or SQL Server or whatever, right, depending on any particular strategic services that they might have as partnerships with other firms, right? We're going to make a decision that we're going to be using a relational database, MySQL, and we're going to host it on Heroku. So that's part of the decision. Also, we're going to be using, as a middle tier, we're going to be using Java Spring Boot, and for front end, we're going to be using React. And what else are we going to be using? And for non-relational database, we'll be using Mongo. Okay. Also, so as a team, you'll be asked to merge together all your SRS documents. Okay? So this is where you're going to, as 9 of you, you're all going to look over your shoulders and what did you write for this? What did you write for that? For the different use cases and functional requirements and whatever whatever assumptions you came to have in the first assignment, right? And you'll merge all that into one single SRS document, right? And wherever you see conflicts, you'll need to resolve those conflicts, right? And some of you might have a better understanding on, it says, no, I remember him saying this or that or the other, right? And I'm pretty sure this is how you interpret it, and just come to a consensus at one single version for this document, right? The other one is the assumptions. Any assumptions you might have made individually, because you interpret it one way, and, or you make a couple of assumptions here and there. Make sure you compare it against other people's assumptions in the organization, and make sure that you all have the same understanding. That oh, well, no, you'll come to an agreement that no, that's a bad assumption, because I know, the TA said this, or in class it was explained this other way. There's no need to assume it anymore. It's clear, yes. Or if there's certain things that are not clear, make any assumptions here as an organization. Still things that might be unclear. Group together all these questions and seek us out, the TAs and myself, as the leadership team or the subject matter expert to make certain answers or some questions there. Also, as an organization, you'll be asked to create an organization dashboard, right? In Jira, you'll be creating a dashboard where you can add all sorts of statistical widgets that can measure the progress of the organization, how well has been able to tackle certain issues, right? What is their burn rate? How many issues were open and how many issues were closed, right? And there's all sorts of statistical analysis tools that you can add to the dashboard to look at the organization and see how it's performing, right? So you'll be asked to create one of these dashboards at the organization level. You'll also be asked to create a Scrum Board for the whole organization, right? Where you can see all the tasks that are assigned to all 9 members of the organization, and see what is in the to-do list, what's currently in progress, what has been accomplished that particular sprint, and you can see how tickets are moving across, right, throughout the sprint. Yes. Right. Don't do this just yet. We need the system administrator to first create the projects and assign everyone to those particular projects. So don't get going on this until we have confirmation from the system administrator that the projects are all set. Also, in previous assignment, you created your own particular Spring Boot application and you deployed it to Heroku, right? So 9 of you already have this working for your personal use. So for the organization, we're going to have to need one single Spring Boot Java middle tier application, yes? So we're going to have to create one of these projects, deploy it to Heroku, also push all this to a common GitHub account, right? So that all the team members can then clone this project into their local repository, as opposed to everyone having their own GitHub repository. Everybody's going to clone from one single centralized repository, right? So you'll be asked to do that as well. So you'll be asked to create a GitHub repository, a Spring Boot middle tier, and deploy it to Heroku. Now we suggest using this naming convention, starting with CS4500, Spring 19, and then the organization name. Now a lot of you are choosing names for the organizations that are very long, and so that might be a problem. So you might need to come up with some acronym, since Heroku has some restrictions on the length of the URL. So you might need to come up with some abbreviated name for your organization, maybe some acronym. For the repository, same thing. We're asking you to create a repository, a single repository, where you're going to have all your source code. For the middle tier, we're going to have other repositories for the organization, right? But for the middle tier, this is going to be our Java middle tier. Later on, as we progress and we add React and we add some other tools, those will have their own repository as well, right? That again are going to be shared amongst the folks in the same organization, but we're not there yet. Right now, we're just going to have one single repository. Right? Next week, perhaps we'll add another repository to do our client-side work, right? And then again, all the team members will have to clone down that particular repository. Also, as part of the skill building and exercise throughout the semester, we're going to introduce databases this week. Right? We're going to ask you to add a relational database to the Heroku instance and connect it to a Spring Boot project that you have built so far. Right? you're going to have to do a couple of configurations. You're going to have to add some dependencies in the POM file of your Spring Boot application to download the right library to connect to a MySQL relational database. Right? You'll also need to configure your project with providing username and password and the URL to connect to the remote database. Right? So you'll need to configure that. All these steps we're going to go over that on Friday, but they're fairly documented here as a set of slides that can walk you through that of going to Heroku, installing a particular remote relational database, and then hooking it up with your Heroku project. Okay, right. So follow those instructions, and we'll help you through that. It's going to be a little painful, but we'll get through it this week. All right. So these are the organization level tasks. You can hash this out any which way you want, right? You can maybe give one of these tasks to one set of students. Maybe 2 folks can go on and create the database. 2 other folks can go on and create the Spring Boot application. Other folks can set up the repository. Some folks can create the organization dashboard, and some folks can set up the Scrum Board. Doesn't matter who actually does it, but these are all organization level decisions and tasks. So you'll work on this as an organization any which way you want to dish it out and who works on what. Okay? So that's I'll leave it up to you who works on what. On the team level tasks, these are tasks that you're going to work in your groups of 3. Right? So team number 1, team number 2, team number 3 of the organization, each one is going to work on separate tasks, but as a team. Okay? So for instance, one of the things that you'll need to do as a team is every week decide who's going to be the Scrum Master. Right? So we're going to be running a 1-week sprints throughout the semester, and every week you're going to rotate who's going to be the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is going to have the responsibility of managing what happens that week, right, and facilitating the communication amongst all the team members, right, and making sure that everybody else has all their tasks in the correct status. Is going to run the Scrum Meeting, 15 minutes a day, and ask everybody, hey, what did you do? What did you accomplish today? Are you blocked? Do you need help? And what are you planning on doing next? Right. So the Scrum Master is going to run these meetings every day, twice a week. Meet in person to see each other's faces for 15 minutes, something very short. And whereas if you can't meet face to face every day, you can meet remotely, either by Slack or Hangout or by email. Right. And every developer, every team member is going to provide at least those 3 things. Right. What did they accomplish today? What do they, if they're blocked and need help, and what are they planning on doing next, right? And those 3 things, the Scrum Master is going to grab that and create a team meeting notes on that particular Scrum meeting for that particular day. So as a team, you'll set up a team dashboard. And just like there's an organization level dashboard, there's also a team level dashboard that can give us a high level statistical analysis on how the team is doing. How many tickets has a team open? How many tickets has it closed? How many tickets are in to-do lists? How many tickets are in done and whatnot? Or how long? What's the average time for a ticket to open and close? All sorts of really cool statistical widgets that can be added to the dashboard, to very quickly see how the team is performing. Okay, so it create one team dashboard. Again, don't do that just yet until we have confirmation that the project has been created. Also, every week you'll be running a team planning meeting, right? That will start at the beginning of the sprint. Right, we're going to arbitrarily choose Wednesdays to be the sprint, at the beginning of the sprint. Right, so tomorrow will be our very first sprint. Right, hopefully by tomorrow we'll have all the project all done, and you can get started on sprint planning. Although there's plenty of things that you can start working on the organization level, right? Like the Spring Boot or the database, right? Setting all the repositories. You can start working on that right away, right? But tomorrow will be the beginning of the sprint. Okay, so every week you'll meet at the beginning of the sprint and start planning. You start looking at, you look at the how did the sprint end, right? What tickets are still in to do? Which tickets were able to close that sprint? Anything that is still in to do are going to carry over to the next sprint. Obviously, we don't have any carryover since this is the very first sprint, right? And you'll identify. You'll identify from your backlog of the tasks that you need to work on. Now, since it's the very first sprint, there is no backlog. There's nothing in our to-do list just yet. Right? We have identified. So at the very first sprint, we will start filling up our backlog of things that need to get done, right? Without regards of when they should be done. Right, we know that we'll need these types of screens for logging in. We need a screen for looking at your profile. We'll need a story to do the registration. We'll need a story for our landing page. We'll need a story for, and we'll create all these stories and tasks and whatnot, and fill up our backlog. Okay, without regards of when they're actually going to be doing or who's going to be doing what. Okay, so every week. The Scrum Master and the team meets and decides exactly which of the thousands of things that we need to do are we actually going to tackle this particular sprint. All right. Typically, each one of these tasks is going to have some size, right, on how long or how big or how complex that particular task might be, and depending on that size, also depending on the priority, we might decide to grab those particular tasks and tackle them this particular sprint, right? Also, based on meetings with the business analysts and the product owner, that they have been meeting with the upper echelons, and they have some new marching orders and some new priorities, and decide on which tasks should be worked on next, right? Also, depending on the technology skill of the project manager or the folks involved in deciding planning through this, they might identify that certain tasks need to be done in a particular order, right? That they might find that certain tasks are going to be depending on each other, right? That it's better to do work on this first before working on that, right? Because this is going to need that next, right? So depending on their technical savvy, they'll avoid putting two stories together where they might have dependencies among each other. Right, where one is going to have to wait on the other. It says, well, I can't start building the web page until I have the designs done, right? Or I can't create the web service until the database is there, right? Or until the data layer is there, right? So there's some dependencies there, and which are the project manager and the team should identify these dependencies. So as a team, you're going to be working on three different aspects. So each team is going to work on a different aspect of the application. Now these come from a design document that that has recently come to light from several brainstorming sessions that the design team and the architectural team has had. They came up with a design document of some of the ideas of the implementation of the application. So the design team has shared this with the engineering team of first approximation of what the navigation might look like in the application we're building. For instance, this is what it might look like from somebody who has logged in and is now looking at their profile and where they might go from here. What do they have access? So certainly we'll have a need for a mechanism for identifying folks and creating their accounts. So we'll definitely need some way of logging in and registering. Not necessarily that they have their own particular screens. These might be part of other screens. Maybe the login is just a little form at the top of the home page. Yes? But here, functionally, it works this way, right? It has the functionality of logging in, the functionality of registering, and then once you register or once you log in, you would have access to some personal profile. Yes? Also, once you reach the profile, presumably you're able to update some personal information and also be able to navigate, depending on your role, you'd be able to navigate to other different places. For instance, if you're an administrator, you would also have access to the administration functionality. But if you're not, then this would not be available. Depending on whether you are a service provider or a service client, some of these screens might be relevant to you, right? If you are a service provider and you clean houses, or you sit pets, or you're a photographer or plumber, or depending on the service that you chose, you'll have different aspects that you would need to fill out, right? For instance, you might choose the different services that you like to be able to provide, right? Here's where you can manage that. You can say, I like to be able to, I'm a photographer, so you can choose that I am a photographer. I'm also a web page artist, right? So you could maybe provide both services here, right? And you can then select a particular service and then parameterize that service, right? Maybe I'm a dog sitter. I'm a pet sitter, but I only work with dogs, right? Or I only work with cats, or I can only do at most 2 dogs, or 2 small pets, or 1 large one. So here's where you can configure, right, the parameters of your particular service. Yes, and each service will have different parameters. If you are clean houses, I only clean houses up to 2,000 square feet. Right? If you're looking for 3,000 square feet, I'm not it. Right? So you can parameterize those kinds of things for each particular service. Make sense? Right? So that's if you're a service provider. If you're a service client, this presumably would be useless to you, right? Also, if you're a service provider, you might also answer all sorts of frequently asked questions that are asked of all service providers. For instance, how many years have you been in business? How many folks work for you? How's the size of your company? Have you gone through a screen background check? Right? What can you tell me about your favorite project? What can you tell me about your least favorite project? So these are frequently asked questions that all service providers might need to answer to give the folks who want to contract them, to give them an idea on whether I'm going to contract you or not. Yes? What else? This over here, this page over here is useful for both the service provider and the service client. Right? For instance, if you're a service client and you found somebody that you want to contract, you might ask them for a quote. You might say, okay, how about I need you to come every Friday and dog sit for 4 hours, every Friday, and how much are you going to charge me? So that quote would be available here and as a request as a service client, and the service provider would also see the quote, right? I would see so that now they can communicate and say whether it's too much or they can agree on a particular quote, and then if they agree, then a contract is created that will details on billing and recurring billing and subscriptions or whatever, right? That would be captured there. Make sense? All right. Let's see. If you are an administrator, you will also have access to the administration page here, and the administration features would allow you to manipulate all sorts of things. For instance, these FAQs, somebody needs to create them, right? Somebody needs to maintain them. Maybe it was a misspelling. I need to fix that misspelling. Maybe I want to add more questions that I want to ask folks. Maybe I want to archive some questions, right? So we need an administration page that handles all the FAQs. We need to manage the quotes. We need to manage the users, right? We need to be able to create a user, remove a user, update some user profile information. Maybe we need to change somebody's password. Maybe we need to change somebody's role and choose somebody to be also a system administrator. We also need to be able to manipulate the services on, be able to add new services. I want to add piano lessons. I want to add, language lessons. I want to add all sorts of other things. So we should be able to add, remove, update, delete existing services. Yes? We also should be able to manipulate the categories of what services are in, right? For instance, a category might be weddings. Yes, that might be a category. And under the weddings category, there might be photography. There might be makeup. There might be catering. There might be all sorts of services for under the wedding category, right? If it's a house category, in there you might have house painters, and you might have lawn mowing or garden, or you might have all sorts of things that are under plumbing and electricity, right? All under home. Yes.
So, sorry, the three teams are users, services, and service categories?
Yes.
Okay. Isn't service categories just like a broader view of services?
Yes, it's a kind of like a container of services. Yeah. Go ahead.
But that requires an entire team.
Probably not. There'll be some dependencies among them eventually. Right. So you'll be asked as an individual, as part of the team, and also individual task. You'll be asked to create a prototype, a vertical prototype, to just learn how to use a JPA and Java services and create this and connect it to a database as a vertical prototype. And of course, this is something that one person might be able to do, but we're introducing a new technology that not everybody will be comfortable with. So we're introducing that new technology. I'm sure there'll be some differences on skills on who's able to do that. Yes.
So when we filled out the sign-up sheet, did it matter team 1, team 2? Are we bound to those teams?
You're bound to those teams.
As in, do they line up with users, services, and?
Yes. So team 1 will deal with users. Team 2 will deal with services, and team 2 will deal with service categories for this sprint. Right. And yes, as we progress, we'll tackle more things, right? And at some point, after 4 or 5 sprints, it'll rotate. So things that had been worked on by team 1 will be inherited by team 2, and so on and so forth, right? So that you'll get a chance to work on somebody else's code and all the pain that entails with working on somebody else's code. Yes.
So the team names on the sign-up sheet are arbitrary?
Yes. Those can be whatever you want. Try not to make them too long, since it just makes it hard to read in a Scrum Board or long lists of tables. So be conservative, right, and keep it clean. So here's also a description, a brief description of each one of these screens. Now, these screens don't necessarily have to be their own actual screens. So for instance, login might be just a little form at the landing page, yes? Or it might be that registration as well. It could be just a small dialog box that pops up. It doesn't necessarily need to be a screen. And some of these might be all mushed together into a single page as opposed to being individual pages, right? They're only functional in that they capture that particular specific functionality. So this is a description here, a very high-level description of what these pages or functionalities entail. For instance, here in admin users, here's a mock-up of what the admin user might look like. It's just a simple table with some headers, some input fields at the top, and a list of users. Also at the bottom, perhaps it might be in the footer, the capability of being able to paginate this, so you can go maybe 10 at a time. Also, you might have some sorting mechanisms that you can click on the headers and sort by that particular field. That you can type in information about a username or first name, and then click on search, and then it'll filter on that particular set of attributes. You can either remove an existing user, and it'll pop up some alert saying, "Are you sure?" Or you can select and edit that particular user. It'll copy here, and you can edit it. You can change the role. You can update or add new users. Very similarly, the service table for editing this will look fairly similar to this, and the service category will be fairly similar to this. Now, we've chosen these three particular aspects since they can, for now, they can be fairly independent of each other, right? So team 1 will be able to work on users independently of team 2 working on services and team 3 working on categories. Eventually though, there will be some dependencies across teams, yes? Right? Because somehow we'll have to relate users to services, right? Saying that I'm a service provider and I am providing that service over there. So there'll be some relationship between the two at some point, not yet. Okay, we'll tackle this a little later. Also, we'll need to create there'll be some dependencies among services and service categories, right? Having to say that a particular service is part of some category, some service category. So there'll be like a many-to-many mapping where one service might be many categories and one category applies to many services. Yes? So we'll work those dependencies a little later, right? Up to this point, for this sprint and for the next perhaps, we won't deal with those dependencies just yet. Okay. Here's the. Also notice that from the profile, I can navigate to the home page, and once I'm at the home page, I can navigate back to the profile if I'm logged in. Now this home page will be dynamic in that if I'm not logged in, then the home page is very generic, right? It doesn't know anything about because I don't know who you are. But if I am logged in, then this home page should be specific to me, because you know that who I am. You might show me some history of my latest searches, some services that I've worked with before, some of my own reviews, anything that is related to me specific in that that landing page. From the landing page, I see several categories: weddings and house and whatnot, pets. And within each one of those categories, I might see specific services in those categories. Yes? I can either navigate to a category to know more about the category, or I might just specifically select one of those services in that particular category. So I can either just select on a service and go to a services page, or I can select the category and then navigate to a particular service. Once I select those services, I can navigate and see a list of providers that provide those services. When I'm here at a particular service, it could show me there'll be several collections of providers of that service, grouped into different aspects. So, for instance, the ones that are near to me, right? So these are the providers that are closest to you, right? Or maybe a history of all providers that I've worked on before, right? So, or maybe a favorite of providers for that particular service, and then down below just all the other providers that are not within any of those categories. I can either choose a provider, right? I can see the list of providers, or I can search, create a brand new search and search for providers that meet a particular criteria. Right, and then list the providers that meet that criteria. I can select a particular provider, and I can see their particular profile for that particular provider, where I can see their reviews, I can see their star rating, I can see all their FAQs that they've answered. I can see any past jobs that they've worked on, all sorts of things about that particular provider. And if I like that particular provider, I can ask them for a quote. It says, hey, I'll fill out a couple of information and say, I need specific information, like I need babysitting or pet sitting every Friday from all day Fridays, right? And that specific will go out to as a quote request to the service provider, and the service provider will see them in their list of quotes from their profile information, and they'll choose to say yes or no. If they say yes, then a contract would be generated. If they decline, then the code would be nullified. Make sense? Right? So this here we've gone on and created several use cases at a very, very high level. Some general use cases where everybody, all users should be able to create an account, all users should be able to log in, all users should be able to log out, all users should be able to manage their personal information, all users should be able to leave the service. If your service client, you should be able to search for new services, manage your quotes, agree to the services, manage the contracts. If you're a service provider, you should be able to answer all your FAQs, register for specific services. You need to be able to parameterize those services. You should be able to look at your quotes and accept those quotes, look at and also create contracts. If you're an administrator, you should be able to manage users, manage services, categories, FAQs, quotes, contracts. We're going to focus on these three this particular sprint, this very first sprint. We'll work on these three. Okay. I mean, there's tons and tons of other use cases. Yes. And there's going to be plenty more than we can possibly achieve in one semester. Right. So the goal of this semester is not to complete this product. All right. The goal of this semester is to, while working on this product, apply good software engineering skills and learn about the process. That's the focus of the course, right? Not actually building the product, right? Building the product will be a side effect of the course, as far as we can get it, as far as we can get it, all right? But that's not the focus, right? If this were web dev, then certainly we would be pushing you to actually build something that works. Right, this is the focus here is more focusing on using the process, software engineering process, to as around a particular product that we happen to be working on. So focusing on these three particular use cases, focusing on those particular three use cases, the design team has gone ahead and created some use case analysis for those three use cases. Yes. Obviously, we would have to create use case analysis for all of them, right? But we're only going to focus on these three for now. We'll revisit other use cases a little later, right, as we gain confidence on our skills. So for the administering manager, an admin manages users, here's the description and here's the basic path. Now, again, this basic path is very high level. It doesn't make any commitments on the implementation, on the particular framework or technology, how we're going to actually build this. It leaves it very vague, right? It says the admin user logs in as an admin. From the profile, they select the admin, the administration functionalities. They select and also it shows what the user does and how the system responds. The system, a set of admin functionalities are displayed. Admin user selects user administration. A set of users are displayed. Admin user reviews a set of users. Admin user searches for users to manage, and so on and so forth. Now, we have deliberately left out one or two steps. Okay, and we ask you as part of the assignment to fill in the blanks if you identify here something that is missing, or maybe not. All right, so analyze the basic path, see if something is missing, if it makes sense to you, if you could add more details to this, all right, and answer that as part of the assignment. We also did it for managing services and for managing categories. These are very, very similar to one another, right? The interaction is trivially similar to each other on purpose. Right, so that each team will more or less have the same level of complexity. Yes, right. It'll become more hectic as we move forward throughout the project. So each one of these use cases will need additional functional requirements right, for each one of these use cases. And we have gone already and created some functional requirements for each one of these, the 3 use cases that we are suggesting here. So for the admin manages user functionality, here are some of the use case functional requirements that we are suggesting. For instance, the system shall display a list of users formatted as a table called the user admin table. That's somewhat specific, right? That it's a table, presumably has columns, it has rows, right? A couple of the things here. The user admin table shall have the following columns: their username, first name, last name, and role. That's pretty specific, right? On some of the titles to use and whatnot. The user admin table shall have one last column on the right-hand side with action buttons, delete and edit. The user admin table shall have a first row with the following fields, input fields, I guess. These are input fields. Username, first, last name, and role. The first row shall have a last column with action to update and add. Here we have admin, same thing for managing services and same thing for managing categories. Everybody okay? Right? So part of your team level tasks, some of your part of your team level tasks will be to copy from here and paste them into the SRS document as a team. So we're pretty much giving you already the content, right? We're just giving you a chance to practice that as a team. You're the owners of these functional requirements. You're the owner of these use cases. As we progress through the semester, we'll give you less and less details. Okay? You'll have to do your own use case analysis. Right? You'll have to do your own functional requirements analysis. Okay? So this first time around, we give them to you, right? And you're just going to copy them into the SRS. Right? In the 4th and 5th assignment, we will just say, create a use case analysis for so-and-so use case. Yes? And come up with functional requirements for those use cases. And you'll be responsible for building that. Make sense? All right? This time around, you're just practicing, right, copying somebody else's use cases, somebody else's functional requirements, and putting them just in the right place and managing them. All right? Okay, so yeah, so those are the three use cases, and they are being assigned to different teams: Team 1, Team 2, Team 3. Okay? And each team will be responsible for each one of them. Okay, so the first thing you'll be asked is take those use case analysis that we gave you, right, in the design document, and as a team, copy them and put them in the right place in the SRS document. Easy, right? Also, we're asking you, is it missing a step or two, right? Can you fix that? Maybe it's missing a couple of preconditions, maybe a couple of post conditions, right? So add those as well. Right. Also, we're asking you for the SRS document to document, who made the change, what was the actual change. So always document any updates to that document, right? And provide a link to the document to the TAs and myself as a deliverable in Blackboard. Also, the functional requirements, same thing. You'll take the functional requirements that we gave you, right? Those functional requirements deliberately are missing a couple of things, all right? And so we're asking you to identify what is missing from some of the functional requirements, right? Maybe nothing's missing. So say what you think is missing. One good thing to do is compare the functional requirements of one of the teams, compare it against another one, see what's missing. Right, see if there's anything that you can gather from there. Also, identify any functional requirements, fix them. Also, update your history, document history, and version. In Jira, we're going to ask you to create epics. An epic is an epic is a very large story, right? For instance, if you say, I'm going to build user administration, right? That's a big story. Right, that probably should be broken up into multiple smaller little tasks, right? Because we need tables for that, we need a user interface for that, we need a repositories. We need all sorts of things, right, for building all this. And this is just going to have to be split up across multiple folks. Yes? Right. So an epic is perhaps a one large story that needs to be broken up into multiple different stories and tasks. So we're asking you, depending on what team you are, to create an epic for your particular assigned use case for this sprint that you're going to tackle this particular sprint. Now this epic is going to be useful across multiple sprints. For instance, this first assignment number 3, is going to ask you to build the tables, build the Java data models, build the repository that talks to the database. So you'll as a vertical prototype, right, for the first one. But later on, you're going to have to come back and create the services. You're going to have to create the front end. You have to create all sorts of things using React. Yes. So that'll entail other stories. Yes. And that you're going to have to tackle in upcoming sprints. Okay. But they're all going to be part of the same epic, right, of building user administration or service administration or category administration. Make sense? Right? So basically an epic is a large set of one big story that needs to be broken out. User stories, you'll be asked to create user stories. That have user stories are basically, these are the most common types of tasks that you're going to be, well, hopefully. User stories are basically new functionality that you've been asked to implement, and they're described from the point of view of the user. As a user wanting to try to accomplish a particular task. As a system administrator, I would like to be able to create a new user. As a system administrator, I'd like to be able to modify an existing service. As a system administrator, I'd like to be able to create a new category. Right. So all those are user stories. From the point of view of the user. In this case, the user being the system administrator, and we're asking you to create, looking at all the use cases that were listed in the designs document. Looking at all these use cases, we're asking you to create stories for each one of them. Okay? And we're asking you to create these 3 types of stories. These types of stories. So one of them will be a design story. Right? Design stories are stories that or tasks that you're going to have to spend time designing something. I'll have to draw up the user interface. I'll have to design the interface that between the client and the servers. Right? I have to create some posts and puts and deletes and gets. You have to design all that, right? You have to design, using some class diagrams, some sequence diagrams on how this is going to talk to one another. So it'll be a design story for that. A research story are going to be those that you'll need to time box to go off and learn something about that you don't know how it works. I've never used React, and so I don't know how React goes out and fetches data from the back end. I need to learn that. All right, so we'll create maybe a small prototype to learn that, and I'll go off and research this, and then come back and report to the team and say, oh, this is how you do it. All right. For instance, part of the assignment here is to create a research story to learn how JPA works. Right? How to have a Java class, a service layer, use a Java persistence API layer to talk to a database, right, and fetch data and store data and retrieve data and update data. So you'll be asked to create a research story. And finally, user story are the most common types of stories. These are, features, new features that we need to build, from the point and describe them from the point of view of the user. So you'll do that as a team. Now, as a team, when you create these stories, especially the user stories, you'll be asked to provide very vague, very high-level descriptions, right? Maybe just a sentence or 2. That's it, right? And you'll assign it to one of the team members, right? One of the team members will say, oh, you can assign that to me, right? In the individual level tasks, you'll be asked to provide more details about that particular story. right? And to be able to fill out the details, you might need to ask questions from the TA or myself, so to be able to hash out some of those stories. But when you're doing creating the user stories, a lot of them will be fairly vague when you're designing them at the beginning. Sprint. Every week we're going to be running 1 week sprints that are going to start on Wednesday. So tomorrow will be the very first sprint. Hopefully we'll have Jira up and running and we have all the projects all set up for you tomorrow. So you'll start every week. You're going to choose a different Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is going to be responsible for facilitating the communication in the team. Is going to be responsible for every week, once a day, for 15 minutes, run a Scrum meeting, right? Where they're going to go around and ask all the team members, what have you been doing, what did you accomplish up to this point, right? What did you work on? They'll ask also, are you blocked? Is there something that is stopping you from continuing? It's something that we can remove. Unblock you somehow. Maybe some other team member can hop on and help you out. Okay. And the third thing is it'll ask you, what are you going to work next? Right. So those 3 questions: what did you do? Are you blocked? And what are you going to be working next? And the Scrum Master is responsible for gathering all these answers and keeping track of these team meetings every day. Right. Now the Scrum Master is only responsible for facilitating these meetings, right? The Scrum Master is not the leader, or is not the, folks are not working for the Scrum Master. They're only facilitating the communication process, yes? Right? And every week, there'll be you'll rotate, and somebody else will take that role the following sprint, yes? The Scrum Master is also responsible for making sure that the meetings are short, no more than 15, at most 30 minutes, okay? And that the team doesn't bog down in details and explaining certain bugs or certain issues that they're having. Right? These meetings are only meant for status reporting status. That's it. And that if somebody is having trouble, right, how can we help you to resolve those issues? Yes, right. If there's you can certainly, if there are issues that need to go into details. Certainly, you can schedule meetings after the Scrum meeting, right? And that you can go into further detail on how to fix something. So at the beginning of the sprint, typically what the Scrum Master will do, they will take a look at the current status of all the work, and say, these things were not complete, right? And they're just going to roll over to the next sprint, and also we'll agree amongst the teams what they're going to work next. Right? It says, okay, well these additional stories, and what they're going to do is going to load the sprints with all these stories that are in the backlog, and they're gonna assign them to folks, or folks are going to assign them to themselves. They say, I can work on that. They'll grab them to each other. Typically, these tasks will have a point. Associated 1 or 2 or 3 points, story points associated to them, and typically the team will agree to a threshold of saying that we're not going to load more than so many points per person, right, and so many points per sprint, right, so that we can based on statistical performance over multiple sprints, they might have determined that they really can't complete more than 15 or 30 points per sprint, right? So it says, whenever we try to tackle more, there's always something left over that needs to that spills over to the next sprint. Yes. Now, at the very beginning of any project, sizing these stories, these tasks is going to be very inaccurate, right? Especially at the very, very beginning of a project. It's very common that you'll either be over-optimistic or over-pessimistic on how far or how long will it take you to do something. Okay, so usually there'll have to be some consensus among the teams on how how complex a particular story or particular task is. Usually you'll have, on larger teams, maybe when you have 8 or 10 folks, usually they play what is called poker. What is it? Story point poker. What is it called? Planning poker, I think it's called. Anyway, where everybody's giving some cards, and they vote how many points they think a particular story is, right? And everybody votes at the same time and throws a card and says, okay, I think that's a 1-point story, that's a 3-point story, that's a 5-point story. And there usually is a wide variety. There usually is some bell curve where most folks agree that about a particular size of a particular story, but there'll be always some outliers that say, oh, that's a 1-point story, and somebody's saying, oh, that's a 13-point story, right? And as a team, you need to agree. Well, what is it? Right? Is it more towards the 1 or is it more towards the 13? And usually we grab those outliers and ask them, well, why do you think it's so easy? Why do you think it's so hard? Right? And they kind of battle it out, and they argue one way or another until the team kind of converges towards an agreement that it's not really a 13, it's not really a 1, maybe it's a 5 somewhere in between. Yes? All right, but again, that's a team effort. Also, as a team effort, the actual meaning of a point is subjective. And what does it mean for a point? Some folks, a point might mean is a one-day effort. Maybe it's a half-day effort, right? So it might be subjective from one team to the next. But a good rule of thumb might be that a 1 point might mean a 1 day, right? And 1 day doesn't necessarily mean 8 hours. It generally typically means that whoever is committing to 1 point is committing to delivering that particular feature or that particular task within a calendar day. As whatever that time might take. It might be that it really took you only 4 hours, or it might actually took you 16 hours to deliver that. But you're committing for having it done by that next day, perhaps. Yes. Also, the pointage is again at the beginning is going to be very inaccurate, right? And you'll probably tend to overestimate and say 3 or 4 or 5 points when it really as you go forward you realize that what you thought were 5 points really was 1, and what you thought was 1 was actually 3. Right, but you'll only know that as you go forward and repeat this over and over and over, and you identify your particular cadence, right? Your particular subjective meaning of what points mean. Okay. So you load the sprint, and based on some maximum number of points that you decide as a team. In this every day for about 15 minutes. You should meet with your team members, and the Scrum Master will be responsible for managing those meetings. You should try to meet at least twice a week, face to face, perhaps right before class or maybe right after class, so that everybody's in the same place. And very quickly, 15 minutes. You don't even have to sit down. Most of these meetings are oftentimes are stand-up meetings where nobody gets comfortable. Nobody likes meetings. So to keep it as short as possible, nobody should get comfortable that this is going to run long, right? So where everybody says, okay, yeah, I finished this, I'm going to start this, I really had trouble with this, could you help me with that, right? Something really quick. It could be in 5 minutes and you're done, okay? So you should, if it's just 3 of you, probably shouldn't take you more than 5 to 10 minutes, right? On larger teams with 8 folks, perhaps it might take 15, but with three folks, it should be really every if you can't meet in person, use tools such as Hangout or Slack, and every day put what it is that you worked on, what you're working on, right? Even if you didn't do anything that day, which is fine, right? Because I know you have other courses, you have other assignments. If you're not doing anything, just say I'm not doing anything today, all right? And perhaps you decide that you're only going to work on this course just 2 or 3 days a week. Maybe that's all you can afford, and that's totally fine. But every day, make an effort, to get into that cadence, right, of just reporting, right, and even if it's just 5 minutes saying, this is what I did, this is what I have trouble, this is what I'm doing next, those 3 lines. And the Scrum Master is responsible for grabbing this and documenting this, and then sharing that with the TAs and myself. All right? All right. Also, if you're in a team, it could be that the Scrum Master doesn't really do anything, just calls on people, just to report, and they to actually write all those details in the meetings in the meetings notes. The Scrum Board. So the Scrum Board, the team is going to have a Scrum Board. So just like there's a organization Scrum Board, there will be a team Scrum Board that is going to keep track of what are the tickets that everybody's working on, right, and what particular state that are they in, and every team member has the responsibility to make sure that those tickets that are assigned to them are always in the correct status, right. Before they come to the Scrum meeting, right, they should make sure to update all their tickets, right, whether something is now in progress, whether it's done and I move it to done, right, so that the Scrum meeting can go fast, right. If you come to the Scrum meeting unprepared and the Scrum Board is not up to date, then you're just going to waste time having to move things where they need to be. Yes. So each team member should come to the Scrum meetings with the Scrum Boards all up to date. All right. So that's the teams. That's the teams. Individually. So individually, almost half of the grade is there were several use cases or stories that were assigned to you at sprint planning. Okay, so you'll be responsible for filling out some of the details of those stories. Okay, those stories are going to have the following format. They have to have a title. Usually, this title would have been created at sprint planning meeting. Okay, but if you research the story and you ask questions and you realize that the title is not quite right, feel free to change the title. You own this story now, right? So write a title that might be more appropriate, and then hash out some details. You'll write out the description. The description should have the following template: and the role, whether this is a service provider, a client, whether this is the administrator, who is this, as a administrator, and then would be the functionality I want to, and then I want to be able to create a user, update a user, remove a user, whatever it is, right? And then the goal of that particular user. So for instance, as a cashier, I want to be able to enter a customer's order so that I can track and review it. Then the done criteria. The done criteria, this should be if you actually finish this feature and you're done and you give it out to somebody else, right? What would they have to see to agree with you that you're actually done, right? So you would say, well, if the story was to create a user, the done criteria might be that the person needs to log in as an assistant administrator. They have to be able to go into the admin. They have to type in their user information. They click on plus, and then they actually see the new record displayed in the table. Right? If they see that, then I would consider the feature done. Make sense? Right? So here you would write, what would a QA engineer, right? How would they test it, and what would they have to expect to see, to consider this feature complete? Size is the points that you specify, how many points you think the effort might take. And finally, the other individual task is that you'll be creating a vertical prototyping. A vertical prototype to learn a new skill, the JPA database interaction with from a Java being able to interact with a relational database. Right? We give you all the source code, so you don't have to actually code anything. You can just copy and paste the code that we're going to give you. It's just you'll have to get it to work. Right? That's going to be the pain point here. Of saying, okay, the source code is right. We've actually tested it. It works. You just need to get it to work in your environments, right? In your particular systems. The again, here's a repetition of what each team is going to be working on. And here's what Team 1, what they're going to be building. Right? They're going to be focusing on user management. So they want to know, they want to learn. I don't know who's, anybody's worked with JPA before? Java Persistence API? All right, very few of you. Good. But you've worked with web services, right? We've done that for the last 2 weeks. So you should be okay with that, right? So a third part of this, you're done. So in this assignment, you'll learn how Java can talk to a database. Okay? All right. And we give you the source code for that. You'll have already configured your Spring Boot application to talk to a database. So all that should already be working. And so here's Team 1. And there are 3 things that each team member is going to be responsible for. Team member number 1 is going to be responsible for the actual data, creating a Java class that represents users, right? Well, users' IDs, usernames, passwords, first name, last name, roles. Yes, with all the setters and getters, which probably you're done with. You've done this in the previous assignment, right? So probably you're done with that. Here. Now, the only difference here is that you're going to be using some JPA annotations, entity, right? And that's going to allow you to map this Java class to a particular SQL table, the users table, right? And you're going to be able to annotate a couple of these fields as being primary keys, unique identifiers on the table. Okay? All right, so this is going to map to a table that's going to look like this. The table is going to look like something like this. Users with these fields, with those varchars, integers, and whatnot, and primary keys. Make sense? That's JPA is going to do that for you. Right? You're responsible to verifying that indeed that actually happened. Okay, so that's team member number 1 is going to do that. For Team 1, you're going to use it for users. Team 2, the same team member is going to do services. And we'll give you the services too. Services maps to a table called services. And it has a primary key. Yes? And for Team 3, it's going to be categories, which again has same thing. It maps to a particular table, and it has a primary key. Yes? All right, so we're giving you all this code. Team member 2 is going to write the code to talk to a database, right, to be able to read, update, delete, find, retrieve data from the database. For the user, they'll have to write a user repository. Very simple, so that they can write the SQL query to retrieve all the users, or retrieve a user given a primary key, or find a user by their username. Yes? Trivial. And finally, the third team member is going to write the service to expose, to use that repository, to be able to retrieve all users, or retrieve a particular user by ID, or being able to create a new user and insert into a database, or to find a user and then change their role and update that user, or to remove a user from the record in a table. Yes? Make sense? Right? Same thing from Team 2, same thing for Team 3. I'm not done with Team 3. I'll be done later this afternoon. All right, but we'll provide all the source code. You just need to get it to work locally in your machine. Yes? Now, this will give you a chance to practice your source control skills. Right? So before, you had the TA merge one of your PRs. Yes? In this case, you're going to have other folks. You're gonna work in your own feature branch, never on master. You're going to do frequent commits, probably not so many since it's something pretty easy. You're going to push that branch. You're going to ask a pull request. You're going to ask someone else in your team to comment on your pull request. Say how great what a great job you did. Make any code changes that your fellow team member might have commented on. Ask somebody else to merge to master, and then notify everybody else to pull those changes and merge it into their own repositories. What a pain, right, working in teams. You know, having to have everybody look over your shoulder, look at your source code, and you know, come up with some constructive criticism of your code. Yes, and then merge everything into the master branch. Okay. All right. Now there are some dependencies between team members. For instance, team member 2 cannot start until team member 1 completes, because the user repository makes use of the user Java, yes? And the service can't start until the repository is done. So there are some dependencies, and you're going to have to work together to manage those dependencies within the team, yes? But there are no dependencies across team. Not yet. We'll introduce dependencies across teams a little later. All right? This assignment only gives you a chance to practice dependencies within a team, even if they're trivial. These are very, very trivial dependencies. Right? We'll certainly have plenty of much more complicated dependencies as we go forward. Everybody okay? Any questions?